Hello and welcome to Film Lovers. I'm Sonia Chung. I'll be talking to people who work in the film industry and who are also avid film lovers. Today I'll be talking to filmmaker, writer and producer Orod Darvish. Hi Orod, how are you today?
Hi, Sonia. Yeah, thank you. That's pronounced Orod. Yeah, I'm fine. Orod Darvish. Yeah, but you can call me with my initials as everyone else, my friends do. You can call me Odie.
Odie.
Hi. Thanks for having me. Yes.
You're welcome. I guess we should start off by asking where your name comes from because it's very interesting. It's not very well known over here. So, tell us where you're
Yeah.
from and how your name became your name.
Yeah. The name itself is a very old Persian name. It's actually a Persian emperor, Orod, or which is in Greek text is being referred as Orodus.
hmm
Uh, yeah, that's my mother chose that name for me. I am what would you call? I'm an Afro-Persian or Afro-Iranian.
Oh wow!
So it's one of the smallest kind of a community, black community that they live in
Sure.
southwest of Iran.
Oh wow.
And my mother is from the capital. She's what would you call Caucasian.
Okay.
uh, but my dad Afro, and then hence the mix Afro-Persian.
Wow, that's a very interesting mix. So were you born in England or somewhere
No,
else?
I was born in England.
Okay. Where were you born?
I was born in the U.S.
Okay. Oh, cool. So you were raised in the United States?
Not fully, just to spend my childhood there.
Okay. So whereabouts in the States were you based as
San
a child?
Francisco.
Okay. Oh, wow. Do you ever go back there?
I haven't been to California as an adult.
Okay.
Uh, I've been to the U.S. to the West Coast,
Sure.
New York and side. Yeah.
Um, so there are a few questions I want to quickly ask you, and then what we'll do is you can basically tell us how you got into your career and how it evolved from there. So let me quickly look on my questions because I wrote some down. so, so
No.
first of all, so it says on your IMDb or on your website that you're a filmmaker, writer, and producer. So I'm sure everyone knows what a film the director is in charge of and what the writer's in charge of. But I think a lot of people will be curious to know, what does a producer actually do on a film?
Well, yeah, you're right. There are lots of assumption about the producer role and responsibility, but it's they producers do and sometimes do invest in regards to the money. They bring in some kind of a funding towards the project or do fundraising. But the responsibility much more than that. You know, there are the people who find the cast, crew, location, and all those responsibilities that would lead eventually for the production side of it. It's part of the producer's responsibility. Although in different countries they approach it to it differently, which I've learned. Like in short film, all the short film I made in the UK, I was the producer. I had to put the money and also find the other cast and crew,
Okay.
location, etc. But in Iran, producer is simply someone who has been given a license from the art and culture ministry,
Okay.
and they are the people who allow you to use their license and charge you 10% of the budget of the film,
Okay.
and then you can find investor and they put money, and then hence you can start the project and follow the procedure,
Yeah.
pre-production, production, post-production.
Okay. So basically the role of the producer is not only to do the financial side, it's basically the practical side of organizing everyone, the schedule, including the cast and crew, onto when to they're basically on the set each. So
Yes.
it's not just the financial side of actually raising money for the film. They're in charge of all the practicalities of doing the film, I guess.
Yes, you're exactly correct. As the producer, previous work, if is as important as writer and director. And everywhere you go, try to raise money or apply for funding, etc. The main three roles they ask is writer, director, and the producer. So three main kind of roles within any project is one producer, and is as important as all the story, the vision, and the directing. The producing is as important.
Sure. So yeah, I'm sure that clears up. Thank you for clearing that up for all of us, because I'm sure a lot of us were always wanting to know that. Hang on, I'm going to refer to my other questions quickly, and then we'll crack on to how you got into your career, etc. So it says on your website that you've done short films, feature films, and you've made a few documentaries. So I've written down a few questions because I was curious to ask. So, for instance, how long or how much preparation does it take to be involved in making a documentary? Is it something you can just go out and shoot straight away, or do you have to do lots of research beforehand?
Before we go any further, I just would like to clear something.
Sure.
Short film the documentary I've done was a short format, so
Okay.
under 20 minutes.
Okay.
And apart from that, I haven't done any documentary, although I have a project which I'm working on developing on. Because while I was, there are other projects including shorts and a script that I was writing, but definitely the way I am planning, I'm going towards this like a proper feature length documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
The research is very important.
Sure.
I find that it's not like a script writing as in normal narrative feature length. Although for that you do your project as well, but this, because you have to approach it as in you want to have an idea and a subject, and you want to talk about something or represent something. So you have to dig into it as much as you can. Information you have to come from different angle.
Okay.
Because which is the main thing. Once you kind of research completed from all different angles that you think you want to put it to the audience, and you talk to lots of people, the experts, etc. And once that is ready, then you can, after that, start thinking about how visually you want to go about representing those points. But the research is very important because it's the context of your documentary.
Okay. Oh, that's very good, because I was going to crack on to another question, which is kind of, you've pretty sort of answered already. So are documentaries meant to present both sides of the story, which you pretty much answered, or primarily from the perspective of the filmmaker?
Well, it can be either, to be honest with you. It depends what type of approach as the filmmaker. There are some framework, but they are there not necessarily to follow, but to understand. And then you can, as a filmmaker, you put your own approach and vision to it. So it depends on the director.
Okay.
For me, I am looking into the whole heritage of the Afro-Persian, Afro-Iranian people.
Oh wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So for me, digging into the historical facts, talking to experts is very important.
Of course.
And how they ended up being, which part of Africa, and how they ended up to be Iran, and how the slavery was perceived there. Then go through the history of slavery and the cultural approach from Iranian and Persian, and there, and how the black community there settled, etc., etc. So for me, it's like almost a historical digging into the situation, and I'm not trying to observe it. I'm just trying to find this, first of all, personal, and second of all, is something that represents this historical fact for people to know. But if there was a different project, let's say, is this something that has some kind of a political agenda, not in a sense that you want to, sway or tell the audience, but just in regards to that subject. I personally, I will prefer to, as a filmmaker, you just put both sides of the argument or perspective about a specific subject and let the audience to decide, because you shouldn't underestimate one thing I've learned. the audience's intelligence.
Yeah, of course. Well, that's partly, why film is about, really. It's to basically make the audience member think for themselves, really, don't they? And they have to sort of draw their own conclusions from whatever it is that they're watching. I was going to ask you, also as you're in preparation for making a documentary, do you need to sort of have a or an aim towards the ending before you actually go out and make it? Or do you kind of, even though you've done all your research, do you kind of later on try and figure out how to end that? Does that make sense? Do you sort of need an idea of how you're going to end it and how you're going to give it a conclusion? Or does that naturally happen along the process of actually making the film?
It's a very good question. And I like you. I like it that you brought it up. And I think this is the type of question that it comes from your side of, because you do writing yourself. And I know that. To me, even writing for the feature film or any storytelling, because this is the type of it's the type of storytelling in any shape of filmmaking. So yes, it's a very good question. For me, ending is one of the most important kind of a section of the story.
Sure. Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah.
Because that's how you leave the audience with that question or that conclusion that you wanted them to think.
Okay.
Or leave the theater with.
Sure.
So, but in regards to the documentary, get back to your question, I haven't reached to the point that now I try to think, okay, what I'm trying to say. And let's say, okay, now I want to close it this way. Because I'm still communicating with lots of scholars and trying to find historical facts and evidence, which is, I found that it's very frustrating because it's not much out there. Even although I have found 3 scholars that specifically spoke about that Afro-Iranians and the slavery in Iran for the last 300-400 years, but it's only 3 people I found around the world. So I'm trying to, at this moment, I am just researching to see what, pile up as much as information I have. And then, after that I complete these research, I'm going to look at it and how I'm going to structure this information and how I'm going to get to the point which you asked about conclusion and what I'm going to leave it. Is it just some kind of storytelling about, this is the community in south of Iran, this is one of the very less known black community in the world, and how they were brought to Iran during the slavery, 300 years ago, etc. Or then I want to have some kind of a personal touch to it. I haven't got to that point. So I'm afraid I don't know.
No, that's all right. We'll get to that when you start talking about your career. So there was one more question I wanted to quickly ask you. So what's the difference between a journalist and someone who's actually making a documentary?
Interesting question. I'm not a journalist. I'm
sure.
just
but from your perspective of the filmmaker.
My understanding. The journalist is, the person that specifically deal with the news and what's happening on the ground.
Okay.
There are lots of, most of the majority of it has some kind of a political affiliation with that incident.
Sure.
Can happen. But the main thing is a journalist, to me, is informing pure information. What's happening.
Okay.
To pass it on to the audience around the world.
Okay.
But the difference with the filmmaker is the vision of the writer or director from the world.
Right.
So it's a personal, and you're inviting the audience to come and see. This is me.
Okay.
This is how I see this subject in the world. So, in a way, journalists should be more careful about not getting involved because they are supposed to be the messengers of the information.
Whereas I suppose the filmmaker is the one who's like you said, is in charge of leaving the audience to figure it out for themselves, how they feel about it, about the subject
Yes.
that they've just seen. Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things I found about being a writer-director is the more you see the world, the more you understand the world, and the more you observe, the more you have a better vision and better depth of understanding of things. And that helps with writing and directing. And then as a director, you are represented and put on the show via that film about whatever subject is about how you see that subject. So it's personal. Bottom line, although you're making film for the public, but it's your understanding of that subject and it's personal. So
sure, okay. Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that. All right then. So why don't you tell us a bit about how you got into your career, why, and basically how it evolved from there.
Yeah, sure. I'm filmmaking. How I got to filmmaking. It's an interesting question because I was listening to other your episode of your podcast. First of all, I forgot at the beginning to congratulate you for a good podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm still learning.
I should have said that at the beginning.
Oh, don't worry.
Even though when you make notes, you forget because it's one of the good things about your podcast is you make people feel relaxed.
Thank you. That's so nice.
I'm bringing it up. Yes, congratulating you for that.
Thank you.
I was listening to your previous guest, and it's funny that although it's not filmmaking entering the whole, as you would call it, film industry, is not as straightforward, let's say, as becoming a lawyer or solicitor or an engineer. It depends on the individual, and everyone has a different way of breaking into the industry.
Sure. And I should say you're referring to the episode of Mark.
Yeah, I was listening. I listened to Tom and Mark, and I think your third guest lady from
Maya. Yeah. Okay.
So for me, filmmaking, the way it happened is I got into film watching. That's the thing. As a very early age, with my dad. I can tell you, that was the only thing I used to do with my dad was because he was a big film lover. And he would watch lots of films, and one of the only things I used to do with him, because of his work, he was always busy, but whenever he had time to spend with me, we would watch film. So I got into watching film from very early age because of him. And also he was always very passionate, and he was always, I could remember now, excited about different actors and tell me about the different films they were in or directors. So me getting into film watching was something that just happened. Okay. And he wasn't the type of person that stopped me to watch any film. I would watch any film regardless of the classification, from horror films to Western films to How old were you? Yeah, and I would watch the horror. He would tell me this is a horror film. I said, no, I want to watch it, and I would watch it, and then I would just get in the middle of the night having nightmare, running back, going to next to my dad, getting up in the middle of the night a few times, saying, "Oh, the vampire, Dracula, or the beast, that monster is chasing me." So yeah, I got into watching lots of film, and he had a good taste. Now I understand. I'm not, when I am looking at it as an adult person who wants to make films and get into it, I realized he had a very good taste. He would watch so many different films, from Bollywood, from French cinema to horror, or everything. But overall, he had good taste. Okay. So this is how I was kind of introduced to film. Okay. But I never, at the time, looked at it as I grew up. I never wanted, well, actually I did. At the age of 13, I wanted to go specifically study filmmaking and directing. But my mom, she always wanted me to become a doctor. Okay. So I was not allowed to go to the college for filmmaking. So I ended up studying science, and I got my diploma in science. Oh, so you made it very far then. Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so you went through with it, but yeah, well, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. Everyone's got a different story how they get into it. Yeah. So I ended up studying biology and all that. I've got a science in diploma, but
Wow.
I rebelled when I got older. And the other thing was that one of the other things that I used to do from early age was drawing and sketching and painting. So when I rebelled and I went to university, but by the way, by then I was about 2 years younger than anyone else because I finished my high school at the age of
Wow, that's really impressive.
16. So yeah, so I rebelled and I went to and applied and got to enrolled in industrial design.
Okay.
And bear in mind, I did my high school in Iran and I went to university there. But because university places were very limited, you're supposed to take a national, like a testing system. It's called Conquer. You have to do that. And then if you pass, then anyhow, I got into this university, art and architecture university, and I study industrial design.
Okay.
But by the time I come to the end of my studying, I started working as a intern designer in a company, which was a multimedia company, and this is late 90s. So they were doing website design and everything. So I started as a intern there.
Okay.
But at the same time, I got interested in I started looking at cinema, got a bit serious about it, and I got to some acting.
Okay.
So for the 2-3 years, 3 years when I was in that company, I gradually ended up becoming full-time and then designer. And by the end of it, which almost a year or two, I was a creative head of a design company, creative director. But at the same time, I used to do some acting.
Sure.
But I got to a point at that time, I don't know, because I kind of went up the career ladder too fast, or because my age, or because I was adventure. I got to a point that I was really felt that I hit my maximum development, as in the sense of that. Okay, I was a creative director, and by that time I had 3 acting kind of experience under my belt.
Sure.
Although they weren't the first role, but they were good enough roles for, I had monologue and close up, etc. It was key roles, that they had to contribute something important to the storyline.
Yeah.
But then I was like, you know what, I've had enough, and I need to. It was a yearn of adventure, or a boy who wants to, or as my mother always says, the birds, the chicks get to a point that they need to expand their wings and fly away.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time, so I had some ties to the UK, so I left everything and I moved to the UK.
Okay.
First, almost about 2 years, the first 6 to 8 months, I got to some kind of a, I don't know, it was a shock to my system. I would say it was a period that I had to go through some self introspection and shedding the skin of the old life and settling everything new.
How old were you when you came over to the UK?
20, almost 22.
Oh, well, that is very young, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it now.
Yeah.
What were you saying? Sorry.
Sorry?
So, what were you saying before I rudely interrupted you?
No. So I went through some kind of a very, as I said, it was a tough time because psychologically, and as a young boy coming and then leaving everything behind and suddenly no one's around and no. But and it's funny because now I look at it. These times happens in lots of people's life if they are happy to go to kind of stop the routine in their life, because routine is something everyone gets lazy to it and happy with it, and they don't want to change and come and deal with the difficulties. Because when you go through difficulties, when you get your character tested and you get to know something about yourself and about life and grow. So I went through a very bad depression for a few months. When I say bad depression, it was something that I ended up taking medicine for it. But then within 6-7 months, I realized, you know what? I need to just get on with it. This is my life, No one's here to cook. You have to learn to cook. You have to eat healthy to have a healthy body and healthy mind. So I got into training to beat the depression, which has helped a lot. Although from early age I used to do lots of exercises and compete in a national level as a judo in a.
Oh wow!
I was a champion. Yeah, I was a champion by by the age of 18, a junior judo champion. But after going to university, everything was just my lifestyle changed.
Yeah.
So I went back to start exercising and going to the gym, etc. And within 2 years, I got back to mentally that I was ready to do something. So, and then that time I sat down and think, okay, let's think about what I'm going to do now.